You can build a plane like this from a HOCK Plane Kit. It's easy. Watch. First, gather all the parts into something that resembles a plane. Notice that the top rear corner is chamfered on both the sides and the rear block. The location of the crosspin holes in the sides is referenced from the rear, so everything lines up from here. The rear block aligns with the rear edge of the mouth. The front block lines up with the front edge of the mouth. The oval mouth slot in the sole needs to be squared up at some point, and it's easier to do this now. Use a file or a chisel or whatever and turn this into this. Now that you know where all the parts go, gather them into their proper places, clamp the sides to the blocks, and drill 1/4-inch holes for the dowels that will align the parts during glue-up. Before removing the clamps, mark the insides of the sides so you'll know where not to apply the glue. Apply the glue, use the 1/4-inch dowels to keep everything in place, and clamp it all up. Let the glue dry. Use a chisel or a saw to flush cut the dowels. The bottom needs to be flattened to receive the sole. Use a plane, sandpaper, or a jointer to make it flat. Don't take off too much, just enough so the surface is flat for gluing. The fore and aft alignment of the sole should be adjusted so that the cutting edge of the blade hits the front of the mouth slot just shy of making an exit. You want a zero clearance mouth at this point so you can adjust it perfectly later. Now drill it like before for the locator dowel, apply glue and clamp it up. And once again, let the glue dry. Okay, remove the clamps, trim the dowels, and take some time to clean any glue that squeezed out into the mouth or throat. The whole area must be clean and tidy. Use a knife, chisel, or a file, and check with the blade to make sure it slides unobstructed down the ramp. When that's done, glue in the cross pin. Apply glue in one of the holes and on the opposite end of the cross pin and slide it in place, cleaning the excess glue from the inside. The glue needs to dry, so this would be a good time to sharpen the blade. A sharp edge is one where two surfaces, in this case the flat back and the bevel of the blade, meet at an intersection with zero radius, or as close to zero radius as we can achieve. This is where our fine-grained steel comes in. By using a steel with the finest possible grain structure, we can get as close as possible to the unattainable zero radius. A blade dulls as its cutting-edge radius gets larger and larger, or, if you will, rounder and rounder. So if this makes sharpening seem easy, well, in theory it is. Simply abrade the two intersecting surfaces of your blade with finer and finer grits until the two surfaces meet with zero radius all along the edge. Any abrasive method you may have or prefer is fine, and there are many available. Just remember the goal of zero radius and work toward that. Today I'm using sandpaper on glass for my abrasive, and for flattening the back, I've added a thin ruler to lift the rear of the blade. This way, instead of flattening and polishing the whole back, I can work on just the 1/4 inch or so back from the cutting edge. This is 220 grit paper, and it cuts through the grinding on the back very quickly. Just a few strokes and it's ready for a finer grit. I've got 400 grit on the other side. Clean the grit from the blade at each paper change. Don't bring any stray coarse grains to the finer grits. You can tell when you're done with a grit if you've raised a burr. It may be hard to see, but you can feel it with a fingernail. If there isn't a burr, you haven't reached zero radius yet. You haven't gone far enough with that grit. Flip the blade over to hone the bevel. These thick blades rest securely on the bevel for honing without a guide, and you'll see two thin stripes along the edge and the rear of the bevel in very little time. Repeat this procedure with finer sandpaper up to 1500 or 2000 grit. Some people even use finer stones and strops from there. Now flatten the sole of the plane. I'm using 100 grit sandpaper here, but you can use a plane as well. Just go slowly and carefully. It's easy to take off too much, and it's a lot harder to put it back on. When the sole is flat, if the blade still isn't protruding, you can use a file to carefully open the mouth just enough to allow the blade to cut. Adjusting one of these planes calls for a small hammer. Tapping the blade increases the depth of cut, while striking the rear of the plane will retract the blade for a finer cut and a thinner shaving. I rest my finger on the blade so I have a sense of how much I'm moving it while making adjustments. How hard you have to hit it depends on how hard you drove the wedge in the first place. Lateral adjustments are done by simply tapping the blade on one side or the other. There we go. Shaping the plane is up to you. I like them simple right off the bandsaw. Some people regard these as basic tools. They keep them rough and don't care how fancy they are as long as they work properly, while others like a little style in the shop. Here's the kit before final shaping. Here's the way I like to use them. And here's one that's just a little fancier. Have fun making your plane. This is Ron Hawk. Thanks for watching.